Good evening, everyone. My name is Wendy Carlin, and I'd like to welcome you to the Springfield Township Board of Trustees meeting. Today is April 14th, 2015, and it is 5:29. Mr. Vernon, can you do the roll call, please?
Yes, Mr. Vernon. Present. Ms. McFarland.
Present.
Two trustees are here.
And Mr. Hunterall is on his way. He was caught up in another meeting, fighting for the township, so he's hung up in traffic, so he should be.
Oh, we just finished the land bank meeting.
Land bank meeting? Okay.
Chair, so it is on his way and stuff in traffic. So.
Great. Okay. Chief Leininger, can you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
We will be honored, yes, ma'am. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chief. Okay. So far in our agenda, as we begin our meeting, we have approval of minutes. And the minutes are from our regular work session, February 24th, 2015. And then our regular meeting on March the 10th of 2015. Need a motion?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Give a second.
I'll second it. That's Mr. Johnson here. I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, Mr. Bernie, can you give us, as our fiscal officer, our financial report, please?
Yes, ma'am, I can. For the month ending March 31st, 2015, the township's expenditures, and I will round these, is $1.113 million, and the receipts were $1,071,000. The ending cash balance was approximately $19 million. This includes obligations to expenditures, payroll, regular operating costs, ongoing capital improvement projects, and investments. What I request is a motion to approve receipts, warrants, payroll expenditures, updated and current revenues and reports for the period ending 3/31/15.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, and I just want everyone in the audience to know that the financial reports are available at the administration offices weekdays during major business hours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bernie. Next, we have departmental action and discussion items. Mr. Hennenkamp, our township administrator.
Thank you, Ms. McFarland. I have 4 action items this evening. The first involves a proposal to increase our EMS billing rates. This is a proposal that Trustee Minor is recommending by adjusting township rates, essentially $75 by an increase in each of the various categories. And the board has copies of the information, but currently our BLS rate is $525, so the recommendation will be to raise that to $600. Our ALS 1 rate would be go from $725, which is what it is currently, to $800, and our ALS 2 rate would go from $800 to $875. In addition, he's recommending that the mileage increase from $12 to $14. That's the recommendation, Chief. I think it's been 3 years since we last looked at this. Enclosed in your packet also is some of the rate comparisons in Hamilton County. I think you'll see that even with these increases, we'll still be at the lower end. But again, our costs for all the things to do are increasing, and I think that's primarily the justification for the recommendations. Chief can add, but that's basically what the thinking is here. And as I mentioned, we're still on the low end. You can see some rates as high as $1,500 for ALS 2 transport. We're still significantly below both that, and still significantly below even the average with these rates. So, well, if the board had any questions, like I said, I'd like to direct those to Chief Line, who's obviously more familiar with this practice and these rates, but pretty self-explanatory.
When I look at these rates, it's interesting that our township has more runs on certain, and some of the other ones that I see plus we have more, our population is greater, but yet those villages have charged much more than what we are. And it seems to me that it's the right thing and the best thing for us to do when you look at the population and look at the number of runs we have and the people that we serve. So I just think it's the timing is of essence, and I think it's the right time for us to do that.
Some of the rates are 30 to 50% higher than our new rates, so I think could you ask for a motion? So moved.
Second.
We have a resolution for that?
I'm sorry, I failed to mention that. Yeah, there was actually a resolution later in the packet. I just wanted to go through kind of the details on it. Yes, that was resolution
2015.
So, all right.
And I just want to thank the chief, for doing the research to come up with the appropriate figures and the numbers, because, it is something that took some time and it's something that's critical. And it's pretty self-explanatory when individuals will look at these rates and see that we are way down compared to other communities.
Something to really, I think it's important to point out that this is a reimbursement. It's not a for-profit endeavor, but this fund is intended to reimburse us for any EMS supplies that we use while transporting an individual to the hospital. And as our costs increase, we have to adjust our rates accordingly in order to stay competitive and be able to purchase the necessary supplies that we need to do. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, when you look at the number of runs we have, it's critical that we come into alignment with other communities. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hennigan?
Yes, our work session last month on the 24th, we had an item where the board authorized me to renew our property and casualty insurance. And at that time, I mentioned to the board that there were a couple of things we were looking at by way of adjustments to that might change. I didn't think it would go up. There was a little confusion in some of the changes that we anticipated. I was thinking was included, they were not. And then we took another look at some of the coverages. So I want to come back and revisit that with the board. The increase is actually about $11,556 from expiring. But as I mentioned at the work session last month, all of that is due to increased coverage. And just to kind of break that down, we're close to $2 million in increased property values that are in our residual. That's property, both physical real estate property and other miscellaneous property that we have. We've added 13 auto units, and we've also increased I think it was 9 pieces of fire apparatus, but we've actually increased the replacement costs to those by almost $1 million. So that's what's accounting for these changes. The increases on the fire apparatus equipment. When you purchase, some of the equipment that we have is like a 91 piece of equipment, so it was still showing the value of what we purchased it for. And obviously, if we were to lose that particular item, we would have to replace it. It's probably something that we might have purchased at $200,000, it's now $500,000. So there are certain pieces of equipment on our schedule that you use replacement cost rather than the actual cost. Certain ones you don't, but on a piece of equipment like a large piece of equipment, like a fire apparatus, that type of thing. So that just wanted to kind of revisit that and maybe seek the board's authorization to renew it with that different, because that's a different number than what we had talked about last month. Most of our property increase has to do with adding light poles. The decorative light poles was previously added on there, so we have included those on as well. So that's almost $1.2 million worth of coverage on those light poles because they're setting up. So that, all of them are not, it's not it's not so much a fee increase or rising, it's all coverages that we've had.
That we need.
Correct. So just seek, like I said, just seek the board's authorization to, again, to sort of revisit that and authorize me to go ahead and renew our property and casualty insurance.
I'll make a motion.
Yeah. So moved.
I second it.
All
next item I have is something we received from Hamilton County. Back in 2003, when the 800 megahertz system was put in, Hamilton County, as part of that, the communication center purchased the radios for both our police and our fire department. And I guess over the years, I think there's been the assumption that those have transferred to us, and the county has realized that technically those radios are still sitting as an asset, as a county asset, since they purchased them and they gave those radios to us. And so they are now in the process of asking, they really have sort of two choices. When they look at their inventory, they saw that they were still there. So they could either ask for the radios back or now officially transfer them to the township. They're doing this not just for Springfield Township, they're doing this for all of the jurisdictions in Hamilton County that are on that system. So what I'm seeking is authorization from the board basically to accept those radios. The radios are going to be reprogrammed here in the next probably couple of months to deal with their upcoming changes to the new system. These radios will be compatible with the new system, but eventually you're not going to be able to get replacement parts. So down the road, the new radios will have to be purchased, Chief. And I don't know that they've decided exactly who's going to make that acquisition yet.
Not yet, no.
Yeah, that's still up in the air, but the cost to reprogram the radios will be done by the county. So a fairly simple thing, but again, just wanted to make sure that the board is up to speed on why we're doing it and seeking a motion to officially allow me to sign the agreement that accepts that transfer of property.
Now, by doing this, any repairs that you said or maintenance that we have to have done on the radios, then we will take them out or to Green Hills to the station, the program out
To
there.
Mobile.
Yes, mobile.
Yeah, to a vendor, or whatever you would previous.
Well, we already do the repairs ourselves, don't we? Yes,
Most,
really,
yeah.
yeah. We don't send
Not
them.
ourselves.
Right, we pay for them, we don't
We
send
pay.
them back to the county to be repaired.
So this should have been done a long time.
It's something I think that they meant to do years and years ago, and they uncovered in their inventory that they still actually were showing those as county assets. And so they were getting back to the transfer, and that's why they're going for the transfer at this time.
So moved.
I second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
The last action item I have is to seek the board's approval to add following vendors to our approved caterers list to the Banquet Hall Event Center, and that would be Jack's Catering, LLC, from Millwood, Kentucky.
So moved.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Just switch around just a little bit and go to our personnel update. A lot of activity in our police department this month. And I'll start off with fire, because I just had one item. Did accept the resignation of Brian James as a part-time paramedic firefighter. Brian's resignation date was effective on March 25th, 2015. And then wanted to officially announce that Chief Heinbold has announced his retirement, and Chief is planning on retiring on May the 29th of this year after 40 plus or 40 almost even. 40 plus years, about 20 as Chief, 21 maybe in that neighborhood. And then of course, as part of our succession plan, something that we've been working on for quite some time, on the chief's retirement, Assistant Chief Rob Browder will then be promoted to the position of police chief on that same day. So 5 o'clock, Chief will retire, and 5 o'clock, we'll have Chief Browder stepping in. So I know this is something we've been talking about for quite some time, as I mentioned, as part of our long-term succession, but officially the date has arrived. So we'll be commemorating that in an appropriate manner as the month goes on, so we wanted to recognize that.
You know, you brought our police department a long way from where it was 40 years ago, as well as met with all of the crises and challenges that face major police departments and moving us toward perfection and excellence with recertification programs that you've set up and implemented. So you had a nice journey. It's been
And we appreciate it.
very much.
For the journey.
More to come on that as the month goes on. Also wanted to congratulate Eric Catherine. Eric is, where's Eric? Yeah, there he is. We had seen him earlier. Eric is in the audience. Eric was promoted to the rank of sergeant on March the 28th. So congratulations to Eric, and also wanted to welcome two new additions to the police department. We have part-time police officer Jamie Bird with us tonight, as well as Justin Palinelli, and their effective dates will be here early next week on April the 20th. Welcome members to our department.
Good to have you part of the team. We're excited. I know. It's going to be really exciting.
Got about a month, chief, to get them up your way now.
And lastly, we did accept the resignation of Dennis Jones as a part-time building monitor. His effective date was March the 5th. And Jessica Middletown also is a part-time bartender at the Senior Center building. Effective date for resignation was March the 27th. Chief, I'll ask you maybe to give us a quick update on your fire hydrant maintenance program and what.
Thank you, Mike. We service 1,700 fire hydrants in Springfield Township. Over the next 90 days, we will be out doing hydrants. We remove the caps, we lubricate, we open the hydrant, flush it. And the reason we do this is to make sure that it's ready in the event we would need a water supply for a structure fire. So when you turn into your neighborhood and you see a big red truck, don't panic. We're there doing maintenance, and encourage you to stop by and say hello. We'll be on your street soon. That's all. Thank you.
Tim, to bring us up to date with,
Can you bring us up to date? We're supposed to have a service and police department open house. What's it?
Kim talk about that as well as the other events going on.
Okay.
We have a lot of events coming up, and the police and service open house is just one of those. Tonight, actually, we have a backyard composting program. We have 75 people registered back in the Senior Community Arts Center for that. This weekend, on April the 19th, we have the pitch hit and run competition at Hollywood Park, and that goes from 1 till 3. On April the 24th, we have our mystery dinner, and Arts Connect is running that event. That event starts at 6:30 p.m. We have our Community Day at the Reds, where Gwen is the honorary chair, and Chief Leininger is throwing out the first pitch on April the 25th. And
That's going to be exciting. I hope you're practicing that hard for
That'll
that
wear a
first
helmet.
pitch.
Did you see Tom Brady? He threw it like Bear Ballard.
Oh my goodness.
Hit 10 feet short. You better practice.
I'll do everything I can not to embarrass the township. The pressure's on.
The pressure is on. That's exactly correct.
I was just getting ready to say, no pressure. In May, we've got a try help us bring down a mammography van out to the Grove from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Our Young Entrepreneurs Program begins on May 6th, and the Police Department, Service Department Open House activities are on May 9th. Just so you're aware of that, all of the activities will be held at the Service Department from 1 to 4. There's going to be a number of vehicles on display, lots of different demonstrations that are going on. Actually, there's going to be demonstrations every half hour, everything from learning about landscaping to canine demonstrations to the police department's got a less than lethal demonstration, which is going to be a big attraction. There's going to be self-guided tours of the service garage, the salt dome, and the sign shop. So all of the activities are free that day, and again, it's from 1 to 4. On May 16th, we're doing the Great American Cleanup, and we are looking for volunteers for that program. Check-in is at the fire department from 8 to 8:30, and volunteers will work from 9 to noon. We have an open house for the chief on May 29th from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. where people can come and say their farewells at the police department. And then the second Good Catch Community Day at the Reds is May 30th. Lots of activities.
And the tickets?
Tickets are on sale right now, $12 for view level, $18 for mezzanine level tickets. Those are available at West Banco and J. Gumbo. We've got a couple left here for the for the April 25th game.
As well as on April the 25th, they have the little, what is the bobbleheads they hand out?
Yeah, it's a bobblehead.
Bobblehead, yes. They hand those out, so that'll be fun, bobbleheads. Yeah. I call them wobble because they wobble. Wobble. There's a dance called wobble.
There is.
Department activity reports.
Yeah, that's, unless the board has any questions, that's really concludes my report.
Next then, we move, glad you're here, safe. And
Made it,
on
we made it.
traffic.
Yes, we did.
Okay, we're going to start now with our resolutions. Resolution number 30 for 21-2015, declaring nuisances pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 505.87, various listed properties within Springfield Township, and authorizing statutory actions necessary to abate the nuisances. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those,
Mr. Bernie?
Aye.
Mr. Conwell?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
aye.
Motion carries.
Next resolution is number 22-2015, authorizing the private sale of junk motor vehicles which were titled to the township pursuant to revised code 4513.61 and revised code 4513.62, and which are not needed or unfit for use in any township department.
So moved.
Second.
I got Joe on that one.
That's
Mr.
Mr.
Bernie?
Joe's got it.
Aye.
Mr. Conwell?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Motion carries.
This next resolution is number 23-2015, and it's the one we discussed earlier. A resolution approving an increase in the ambulance billing rates.
So moved.
Seconded.
Ms. Bernie?
Aye.
Mr. Conwell?
Aye.
Ms. McFarland?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, old business. Anyone have any old business?
The only thing, we had talked about putting House Bill 64 on our agenda, and kind of the more I look at that, I think where that issue would be better raised would be the Hamilton County Stormwater Oversight Board that deals specifically with those issues. We have a meeting coming up there, so I think I'll talk to Todd Long, and we'll just let that be something that board can address. And that way it would be, approximately 30 jurisdictions versus just Springfield Township sending a letter. And we'll, I think it's more appropriate to deal with it in that form.
We have power and numbers as well. So that would be
I
good.
agree.
Okay, any old business?
No.
Okay. New business.
I have one item, just to make everybody aware, May 5th, Winton Woods has a school ballot issue, so if you're in the Winton Woods School District, we encourage you to vote.
Okay. Do you have any business, Mr. Hall?
Yes, I do. I apologize for being late getting here. I was representing the townships at a Hamilton County Land Bank meeting, and Commissioner Hartman couldn't make it today, so I got stuck chairing the meeting and couldn't leave in the middle of it. But it was a good meeting, and we brought up some issues which directly impact townships and Springfield Township for that matter. And that has to do with the properties that go into tax delinquent foreclosures. There's two types of properties. There are mortgage foreclosures and tax delinquency foreclosures. And the two have different processes. The bidding requirements are different. On a mortgage foreclosure, the opening bid has to be 2/3 of the appraised value, whereas on a tax foreclosure, it's the back taxes plus the court costs. And if it doesn't sell, on the tax foreclosures, if they don't sell after 2, then they go into a process where the minimum bid becomes $5. And we were looking at some statistics, and it's really kind of turned, what happens is a lot of people go out and buy these properties for $5. Some people are putting them on the internet, and like it'll show that they bought it for $5, 6 months later they sold it to somebody for $10 that might live in Hawaii, and then if you don't pay, well, the property just goes back into the tax foreclosure system. And so a lot of these people buy these things for $5 or $10, put them on the internet, see if somebody else will buy them. They maybe buy 25 of them, and then they'll find one that somebody buys for $2,500 or $3,000, and so they make some money at it. But it creates problems for townships like us that are and really any local governments that are having these properties where they're abandoned, and we're having to pass nuisance resolutions and spend our taxpayers' money to take care of them. So we're trying to come up with some regulations that will allow us to not let this be kind of a game where people can go out and basically what they're doing is for $5 you can become the owner of the property, and then it might be 2 more years, you don't pay any taxes, it might be 2 more years before the county takes it away from you again in another foreclosure. And we also discussed the issue of the prosecutor's ruling that says that local governments, if we are to try to acquire a property that has been through this process, we have to pay the back taxes and the court costs, which many times can be a deal breaker. But sometimes, not that there's, a lot of these properties are, it's some narrow strip of 2 feet wide, and it's something that wouldn't be of value. But I think there's an opportunity. Sometimes there's a strategic opportunity for the local governments to try to acquire them. And we, as a local jurisdiction, I think we need to be looking at these, and I know, Chris, that you do, to try and ascertain if there's any that have a value either to the township, or we might come up with a strategy to, return them to, a productive use instead of just sitting there as basically abandoned property. And so we're going to work with the land bank and try and come up with a better way of doing it. Some of the other counties, I know Franklin County has a minimum bid of $100. So you can kind of deter some of these people who are just sort of playing games. So basically, they're buying an option on the property for a couple of years. I know they were talking about some guy bought 10 parcels for $5 a piece, and lo and behold, it was where ODOT had to acquire land for the MLK interchange, and of course he sold it for full value plus they pay his taxes. So there needs to be a way to make sure that the public good is being served here.
Mr. Manager, as you know, I'm fairly involved in this. I look at these properties on a monthly basis that the prosecutor's office sends to us. It indicates we have the ability to acquire one building to House Bill 138, which would allow that to happen. The prosecutor's opinion, and I'm curious to know, the prosecutor's opinion is that we have to pay the back taxes, which, as you're aware, in many instances exceed the fair market value of the property, which is why they're in the situation where they are, while the private market isn't taking those properties on. And as far as I'm concerned, and looking at the law, I know Mrs. Abrams and I looked at it, the law isn't specific and says we would have to pay the back taxes. That's an opinion of the prosecutor. It isn't something that's a strict interpretation of the law. So I'm curious, are they still holding to that opinion?
Well, apparently, there was a presentation by one of the members of the Port Authority. Apparently, there are 3 prosecutors' opinions. Two say you have to pay the back taxes, one says you don't. And in none of those are just opinions, they're not law. There's apparently no cases on it. It's a kind of a complex area of the law that are different. Voting, you can see voting subdivisions, and I think that there's a special, term of art for that. They have the ability to require them and not pay the back taxes. I think the general public jurisdiction does. The land bank does not. And the strategy is if they raise the minimum bid, they're going to have more of these properties people won't bid on. They're going to go to the land bank, and the land bank is going to try and partner with local jurisdictions and be able to pass them on that way, if need be. And, but the land bank strategy has never been to hold any properties long term, but to turn them over and, try and make them productive. And I mean, it's the same way for the township. I think we would be looking for the same strategy. So, in any event, that was kind of the main part of the meeting. Well, there's a lot going on with the land bank. They're spending quite a bit of state grants, demolishing blighted properties throughout Hamlin County. A lot of them are in the city. The city has the majority of it. They're tearing down over 100 houses just in one program alone this year, and tore down over 100 last year and slated for another 100 next year. And then there's the bigger projects where they're actually taking down multi-family complexes. And so I think there's good that's coming out of it, but it's the whole idea is to try and get stimulate some of the areas so that free market can come in and start picking up. And actually there's a project in Evanston where the land bank's acquired, I believe, 11 properties, rehabbed 5, sold the first one starting from around 19 to, I don't know, it's 130,000, something like that. And they now almost are having bidding wars, people trying to buy the next ones before they're even rehabbed, and the realtors saying we're going to increase the prices to about 160,000 on the next group. So it's starting to pick up and take some blighted areas and turn them around, and it's things we might be able to use out here.
One of the other things I will mention to the land bank your next meeting is that, as they know, those properties, once they go through 2 foreclosure sales, they end up being forfeited to the state.
Correct.
The state only has a sale, I believe, at the most twice a year. So in between those 2 sales, jurisdictions like Springfield Township continue to have to pass resolutions and mow these properties. So if they could somehow figure out a way to maybe allow those properties to be acquired more often than twice a year, I think would go a long way to help that issue as well.
That's a very good point. One of the things Commissioner Portune brought up was what he was interested in, what is the cost. I said it's considerable. Now, these are not all tax foreclosures that we have. I mean, some of them aren't foreclosures at all, but there certainly are a good percentage of them that are. So, I said maybe the Center for Local Government. I don't know if they would. I doubt they track that information, but they would have the mechanism to put out an email to all the various administrators saying we're trying to get input on it. Yeah. That would be the easy way to get that information, I think.
Yes.
Sponsor, we could request that information.
I think that would be helpful. Okay. That's all I have.
Okay.
Again, sorry I was late, but I don't get set to the meetings.
I'd like to also update our community. We have several projects in the community that we've been working on for the past year and maybe a year and a half as far as getting the work done on the streets. And so I'm pleased to say the Greenfield project is almost completed. I met with some of the neighbors in that area. There were some concerns about, just the whole improvement of that area. And I'm happy to say that beginning April the 20th, for the Greenfield project, as well as for 3 streets in Lexington Heights, we're going to begin to grind down the existing asphalt surface. And when that surface is removed and when they grind it down, they will be able to inspect the areas to see if there are any weak spots there. so that they then can repair those. And then they'll put in a stress absorbent membrane to kind of help support the process as well. And this will seal the surface and eliminate any reflective cracking. Then again, once that's applied, baseboard is applied, then the contractor will make repairs. And the repairs will be around the perimeters of the manholes and catch basins in the project area. And then they will finish the actual asphalt surface course. That's great news for those individuals who've been waiting for years for this to happen. And it takes time, and those areas have been one of many that need a lot of work, to get them done. We were able to do this with SCIP grants, and that's another great sign. So just reminding neighbors who live in those areas, just be prepared for maybe some interruption in traffic. There will be a project inspector on the site at all times, just to kind of help make that transition less problematic as well. So that's good news. And the other one is I had the pleasure of spending about an hour with the Ohio Speaker of the House, Cliff Rosenberg, and just talking about some of the issues and concerns that we are seeing and have here in Hamilton County. And so, of course, I was speaking on behalf of local government and ourselves in the township, and just trying to determine just what the government is going to do, what the governor is going to do as far as returning some local government funding. It still is up in the air. It doesn't look like it's something that they really have developed a formula for. It's not one of their priorities, which has been very clear in the last 3, 4, 5 years. But, he was very optimistic as far as maybe somewhere down the road they can look at that, but not to expect any miracles, because they have other things that they're looking at, and he focused on things like jobs, which we are as well, always trying to look at what we can do to provide job opportunities for residents in the community, as well as economic prosperity, which is what we're all trying to work and do in Springfield Township and in other local governments as well. So it was an interesting meeting. He was an interesting person, and I felt very optimistic after I spoke with him. And I plan to have another follow-up meeting with him at some point within the next 6 months, and continue to look at where we are as far as Springfield Township is concerned in local governments. And I'd like to say that State Representative Alicia Reese also helped pull that meeting together for all of us, for businesses and et cetera. And as we talk more about job opportunities, Alicia Reese, State Representative Alicia Reese, is sponsoring a job fair, and that job fair is going to be on April the 17th at the Woodlawn building. It's actually the Woodlawn National Guard and Recreation Center, and the address is 10050 Woodlawn Boulevard in Woodlawn, Ohio. I had the opportunity to attend that job fair last year. I was amazed at how many individuals from our township actually were there. And some of the individuals that I met actually, and you always have to bring your resumes, of course, but some of the individuals that I met actually were able to get appointments and interviews scheduled for job openings. So if anyone has needs a job and is looking for a job to improve their job opportunities, I'm strongly encouraging everyone to go down there. The program starts at 10 o'clock, and they're going to have a special opportunity for veterans, and that will be a closed session for just veterans from 9 until 10, and then it opens up to the general public. So again, I would say out of the individuals that I met that were just from Springfield Township, 3 of them ended up with job interviews on location at the particular employer that was there. So there's lots of opportunities there. And I think that's all I have. So it's a lot going on in the township, a lot of opportunities. I think your report was just excellent, in helping to look at the challenges that we're all facing as well, as we continue to look at how we can maintain some stability and have a nice balance in our township, because that's what we're all about, and looking at economic prosperity as well. That's all I have. Now it comes time for citizens participation, and I would there's anyone in the audience that would like to discuss any concerns or any positive things that we're doing in the township, please step to the podium. And I always request that when you do step to the podium, anyone else in the audience, if you could abstain from speaking, so that we in turn can hear what the individual is saying at the podium. Is there anyone interested? Yes, sir. And when you step to the podium, you can give us your name, please, and your address. Thank you.
My name is Gary Herron, Herren. I live at 8842 Fontainebleau Terrace. I'd just like to bring this to your attention. The service man that did the repairs yesterday told me to come up here, and I just talked to the gentleman over here, and we have a major problem between Winton Road and the entrance to the school is totally destroyed. There is nothing left of the street. In the last 6 weeks, they have repaired the same hole 4 times. And it was repaired yesterday, and I have measured it 12 to 14 inches deep in this area. And the whole street, the curbs and everything, it's about 22 houses long, 50-foot houses. You can about figure roughly how much it would cost. It's like I mentioned to the gentleman over here, I said maybe it's something we need to look into. Yeah, maybe we don't have the money now, but can we put something on to try to get this? I can't even cut the grass. Before I can cut the grass, I gotta rake all the rocks out of the grass before I cut, or else I'm gonna run the lawnmower. I'm not the only one that goes. It's the busiest street in the township, to be honest with you, because we get every bus from Winton Woods, North College Hill, all the buses from Finneytown. They'll bring the kids to the high school, then they'll drop them off, then they'll have a run going to St. Bart's, St. Vivian's, et cetera, et cetera. So you got a constant, and it's just totally, the whole street going to Compton is bad, but in particular, that one section is just, like I said, totally gone. I just went out this morning, and the whole way past yesterday, you can already see it. In another few days or a week, it'll be gone. It was down to rocks this big, all the way down to your base is where it was at. And my daughter yesterday was picking them out of my yard before she could even cut the grass, and I said, well, this is something. And then the gentleman asked me to come up, and I said, well, I'll do it. And I just happened to ask him for some information what they need to do, and here he is, he's in charge. And I didn't realize it. Yes, I know it's something that you can't say, oh, we're going to run and do it. But I thought, like I told him, maybe 16 or 17, we can do something and try to do something in between the curbs and everything. I'd appreciate just taking a run down there and look at it. It's really in bad shape. This is going every year. And I'm sure he can give the reports of how many times they're down there. I mean, it's just, it's really costing us a lot of money in the township down there. Every time I turn around, I see trucks down there, and I'm sure he can verify what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Mr. Herron, thank you. I know that there are a lot of streets,
I know.
here, and I'm going to talk with Mr. Musselman and have him reassess that as well. He is putting together a report he's doing a complete analysis of the streets in the township, and he will put together a report looking at which ones are critical, which ones are poor, fair, medium, poor, and then we move forward from there. But those that really need excessive work, that's something we need to look at even more.
Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I reassured Mr. Herron that I was going to look at the area that he described tomorrow, discussing with John. We'll see what we can come up with from a short-term solution as well.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Is there anyone else? Yes, Ms. Fields.
Yes, Anna Fields, Pleasant Run Farms. I live at 1962 Fallbrook Lane. We have brought our concerns to you before about some streets in Pleasant Run Farms, And I know they were being taken under consideration, but I had an experience last week that I think you really need to give some more consideration to. With the last storm that we had, I think last week, there were huge chunks of pavement and gravel in the circle where I live. And I had a great deal of difficulty navigating to and from my driveway. It looked like a disaster area because there were so many big chunks and so much gravel with the additional potholes. It was like driving on a country road. Another resident did help me remove some of the large chunks. We put them in a garbage can for Rumpke to take away. I did contact Mr. Musselman, and the very next day he sent a crew out and they filled those potholes and cleaned up most of the debris. And I did send him an email to thank him because I really appreciated the prompt response he gave us. But I explained to the crew when they came out that I lived in that circle almost 40 years and I have never seen so much debris and so much bad pavement. And it's been patched many times and they have swept it many times. But this was really the very worst. Everybody came out and was looking like, we cannot believe our street is like this. It's a short street, and even though we had named it for resurfacing, Dearborn was one of the main streets we wanted resurfaced because the school is there and it's a main artery. They've resurfaced part of Dearborn from Elkwood in that direction, but toward John Gray Road, toward Fairfield, that's where it really needs a lot of work. And I know that you guys have spent a lot of money on streets in our neighborhood, and I appreciate that. However, some of those streets have been paved twice, and some have never been paved except initially. And we drove around the neighborhood, I think I told you guys, we drove around like 2 hours listing every single street in our neighborhood to try to evaluate which one should have priority. 3 of those streets, including mine, are the farthest point of Springfield Township toward Fairfield. We're right on the border. So we kind of feel like we've been neglected and feel like the stepchildren right now. One of my neighbors took photographs and she wanted me to submit these to Mr. Musselman so you could see all the cracks. And what we're afraid of now is that when it rains again like it did last week, that's going to just lift up there's so many cracks in that pavement that it's going to lift up again, and more that's going to come down the hill into the circle. We're afraid it's going to dislodge again. So no matter how well we maintain our properties there in Pleasant Run Farms, if our streets are in such poor condition, it depreciates our property. And so we would like for you to seriously, evaluate the situation and see if you can come up with a solution. We would very much appreciate it.
And that is something Mr. Musselman has also, he's reported back to Pleasant Run Farms individuals that have sent letters to us, and he is looking at all of our community, not just Pleasant Run Farms. So he's going to do it. He's doing a global assessment, and then he's very thorough when he does that. But if you can share those photographs with us in the service department, and then we will again get with Mr. Musselman and see, do we know when he plans to have that report?
I think it's, the report that we're talking about, we did complete last fall. So what we're going to do is we go through and update it. I don't think there's going to be anything earth-shattering. I mean, you're seeing sort of 2 things happen. One, this is the time of the year that we've had 2 of the worst winters that we've ever had. So any of the streets that are in bad shape, obviously we're breaking up. You're getting this throughout, not just in Springfield Township. If you drive everywhere, you're seeing this is a problem from the winter. And when you have streets that are in the condition of a lot of our streets are, which is no surprise to us, these aren't revelations. I mean, we've been saying for the last 10 years that we've got an aging infrastructure system. We ran, I think, 4 levees back probably close to 10 years ago. All of them failed, and it was for the very reason that we said, that outwardly and physically they didn't look like a problem. We knew that what was happening to these streets, and you've got to keep up with them, and quite frankly, the money is not there. We have close to 22 mills of taxation in Springfield Township. One of those 22 goes for roads, that's it. So, it's close to 5% of the total taxation goes to fix roads. And people have spoken on this issue many times. We don't want to pay more property tax. And as we now know, that's the remaining issue that's our remaining opportunity to raise revenue. There's no other means by which to do it. So we're looking at that. I don't think when that's going to be terribly different. I think the number, when we looked at this back in the fall, was to fix township streets is about a $40 million price tag. Right
Yes,
now.
it is.
And we have 100+ miles of road, and we have a growing number of them that are in this condition. So the fact that we know that they're in this shape, now there's going to be situations where a pothole will open up that we might not be aware of, and we need people to call on that. But just as far as the overall condition of the street, we're well aware of it. And while we've been highly successful in the skip process and leveraging those hours, it's still not, we're not catching up. We're falling further and further behind. And that's what we talked about, State of Township, what we talked about at that work session, was to evaluate what the options are. The bottom line is it's going to cost money. It's going to cost a lot of money to do it. And there's assessment and it's property tax. Those are the two main options that are available to the township by state law. There are no others.
I know it's a shame because I recall that, and I'm also a person who is very concerned about taxes. I don't really support any unnecessary taxes, but when we had the levy that came up before, the last 3 or 4 times, we predicted, we said, yes, some of your streets may look nice today, but what are they going to look like in the next 10 to 15 years? So we were trying to be ahead of the game so that we wouldn't get to where we are now. But it's true, we've got $40 million is a lot to try and get done.
Yeah, and that's to bring them all, that's if we took all of the streets and we wanted to bring them into what we consider good condition. Not all of them in full rehabilitation, but it's a matter of doing things now to hold them. I think what we're seeing on a lot of these streets is the sub-basis is growing. And that's exactly, you can feel that all day long. When the sub-base is moving, unfortunately we're in an area that has some difficult soils to begin with a lot of lake-bed clay, so it moves, which means as that asphalt is brittle, it's going to break, and there's just nothing under it to hold it. So it requires substantial cost to repair.
One of the, I agree with Ms. Fields when she says that it affects your property value, and it does. And I think one of the problems that we had in the past with some of our levies is, okay, your street, your subdivision got done. Well, then you would look at it and say, what do I need a road levy for? Maybe, and this is one of the things which we've talked about and need to look at, is perhaps creating districts where we put before the property owners a ballot initiative to do an assessment that would fix their streets, and that would be the sole purpose of that, and then leave it up to the individual property owners if they want to get their streets fixed or not. That's one possibility, and so I think we're going to need to. This is, if you look at the township, sort of big picture into the future, this is the big issue. Is dealing with the infrastructure, primarily our streets. And so I think it's a priority of the board. We're trying to come up with a way to do it. The voters have spoken, Now some of those levies barely
First one lost, I think, by 15 votes.
Yeah, it was just almost 50-50, but still didn't pass. So.
Yeah, I think this is the issue that, as you said, Joe, this is the issue we've identified as, we've made a lot of progress in our financial stability issue with the passage of the JED last year. That made up about 30% of the loss, 50% revenues that we had. And again, this is just in the general fund. The problem we're having is The service department, just the operational aspect of the service department, they have 5 different major funds in which they receive their funding. Unfortunately, if you look at those revenues and where they are this year as compared to where they were 10 years ago, they're relatively flat. So as costs go up, those particular revenue streams stay the same, and it does that for a variety of different reasons. It's just the nature of where that money comes from. In other words, 2 of those funds are motor vehicle license tax funds. Well, we have about the same number of motor vehicles registered in the township as we did 10 years ago, so you're not really seeing much of an increase. The gas tax really hasn't gone up in any significant way. The road and bridge is the only piece of that that's actually property tax based. And so, but when you look at those 5 funds, the general fund has to augment the operation of the service department by about $1 million this year. And we talked earlier at our meeting in March, where the purchase itself we're estimating the cost roughly $350,000 in this year's budget. Now, that's obviously to fill the number for next season, but I mean, these are the kind of costs that we're incurring. Those are required things that we have to do. But yes, the solutions, unfortunately, there's no easy choice. There's no silver bullet. There's nothing that's not going to be painful. All of the choices are painful. And I think it's going to take a multi-pronged attack. That's what we talked about in the comprehensive neighborhood master plan. Identify that, the thing that you just talked about, maybe creating districts in the township. So in other words, if Pleasant Run Farms wanted to pass the levy, they didn't have to wait for the whole township to do it. This would guarantee that streets in their neighborhood would be fixed. Assessments are another good way to do that. If you have a street that's in need of total rehabilitation, assessment's probably not going to be a very good option because the cost is just going to be too high.
Property owners wouldn't be able to afford it.
No, but if you can come in on a street that's still in pretty good shape, but if you catch it now and you do, say, a 1-inch, a micro overlay, or there's some new products out there, and you do that now, you're going to need 5, 10, or 12 more years for that street, and it can be done relatively inexpensively. We looked at a couple of sample areas where it might be, somewhere in the neighborhood of $40 to $50 a year. Well, that's about $1 million. The difference is that homeowner, so it sort of works like a levy, it's an assessment for 10 years, but that homeowner can be guaranteed it's going to be on their street. Not, hey, I'm passing this levy, now I'm going to get in line with every other street in the township. So, but as I said, that's not going to work for all of us. So that's what we're talking about, as John, Mr. Musman, we looked at as to the type of repair needed and put those streets into good, fair, and obviously failed condition. And the failed aren't going to be eligible really for the assessment. The district idea is a great idea, but legislation doesn't allow it. So that would take a change to state law to be able to do that. So that was something we have to lobby to get. But again, it allows then the property owners to control their own destiny a little bit. Fixing them is the easy part. You just need the money. The money just doesn't exist right now. As I said, the JED's money is going primarily for the $1 million to keep the operational aspect of that department going.
And that's critical that we do that, keep that.
Well, that's just the state, but that's what, those are the crew and the maintenance that we have on a daily basis to keep up with. So it is, and I think you identified, it is the #1 issue. We've made a lot of progress in other ones, but that is on the rest of this year's agenda to come up with the options and the solutions, and hopefully by the end of the year make a recommendation to the board on which is the best way to go. But unfortunately, there's some degree of opinion with all of them. There's no easy.
When I was working with John and looking at, what all is involved as of today, what we do with streets that we're working on now as of April the 20th, and he walked me through again the process of, that whole process is very expensive, and it's just for 2 or 3 streets. So if we look at, let's say we had 75% of our streets in that condition in Springfield Township, that's close to it. What was it that we say, the $40 million? So let's say it's about $30 million to do that. And that's a lot of work in detail to give some viability to the streets, the roads to enhance their lifespan for at least 20 years. my understanding is about 20 years now.
You're looking at a full, in most cases, a full grind down, removal of the existing pavement and curbs and gutters. And it's, if you're gonna fix it, that's the only way.
That's the way to do it. Absolutely.
We can do it, and it's expensive. Mike, I don't know if you know about on average what repaving a mile is, try to know that, catch off guard.
Yeah. 400,000 or 500,000.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's about $500,000 a mile right now. So, you've got over 100 miles of road, and it tells you about,
The story right there.
what the cost is. Probably about 25% of them are in that failed condition, so, there's no shortage of failed roads. We're aware of where they're at. It's not that we don't know that, but it's coming up with, a solution for those.
By the same token, when we have certain streets, sometimes the street will just come apart due to weather events or different things. So we are going to get out, we're going to look at Fountain Blue, see what we can do to keep that, basically keep it Band-Aided, put a Band-Aid on, figure out some way to get by with it until we can figure out a permanent solution.
And Mr. Herman, he talked about the traffic, that is high volume traffic up and down that street.
Heavy volume.
Heavy high volume, exactly.
Probably
Big
a lot of
buses.
heavy buses.
You had 2 points there that I just caught. You said something about there was a close thing on the ballot. I think you ought to consider trying putting it on the ballot, but when you put it on the ballot, you use the report that you have, how many miles of roadway we have to do, how much it's going to cost, how much percentage. If you break all this down to the people ahead of time, that they can see, and then start putting pictures in the hilltop and at streets that just totally are destroyed. Maybe you can get the thing passed easily. I voted for it the last time, and I vote again in a heartbeat, because I know there's quite a few streets that need it. I don't like to spend the money, but I do like to have my property value go up, and that's going to, for me to spend $1, I can get $2 for my house.
That's the way you should look at it.
That's the way I look at it.
That's the way the
And I think if it was publicized that way, and you put it on a ballot, you say it's going to cost X amount of $1 million, 400 million, whatever. You say you got 70% of the roads, and you start showing how many miles of road you got to do. People will sit there with bad streets and say, my gosh, we got 75%. Well, that probably, fix our street. It might fix our street. Then you get other people thinking.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shirley Kira. I live in 9344 Montara Drive. I'd like to thank the officers that came out to my house. I complained about hearing the shooting and that part of my chimney came off. Some chunks of my chimney came off, and I really appreciate those guys coming out there, checking it out. So far, it has stopped. So far, but I don't know, what's going to happen down the road. But I appreciate them coming out and doing what they did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Seeing that there's no one else at this particular point, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.